The champagne bubbled in crystal glasses as Manhattan's elite gathered on the 42nd floor of the Chrysler Building, their voices echoing through the Art Deco ballroom where shadows danced against polished marble walls. Outside, October rain drummed against floor-to-ceiling windows, each droplet catching the warm glow of chandeliers that had witnessed decades of corporate celebrations and backroom deals that shaped America's business landscape. The scent of expensive perfumes mingled with the aroma of aged whiskey and imported hors d'oeuvres, creating an intoxicating atmosphere of wealth and influence that Sarah had once dreamed of belonging to but now found suffocating. Sarah Mitchell adjusted her black blazer one final time, her reflection multiplying infinitely in the mirrored columns that lined the venue's entrance. The blazer had been a splurge from her first bonus, purchased during a rare Saturday afternoon of shopping when she had allowed herself to imagine a future where her contributions would be recognized and rewarded appropriately. 3 years of 14-hour days, missed family dinners, and coffee-stained presentations had led to this moment when TechVision Industries would unveil the revolutionary software platform she had conceived, developed, and refined through countless sleepless nights in her cramped studio apartment overlooking Washington Square Park. The journey to this night had begun during her senior year at NYU, when Professor Martinez had challenged her advanced algorithms class to develop a business application that could solve real-world problems affecting small entrepreneurs. While her classmates focused on flashy consumer apps designed to capture venture capital attention, Sarah had spent hours interviewing her uncle's struggling bodega owners in Queens, listening to their frustrations with expensive, complicated business management systems that seemed designed for corporations rather than corner stores and family restaurants. Before we continue with Sarah's story, make sure to subscribe to our channel to help us bring you more real stories like this one, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from around the world. Her boss, Richard Blackstone, stood near the podium like a peacock displaying his feathers, his silver hair perfectly styled and his custom-tailored suit worth more than Sarah's monthly rent. He commanded attention effortlessly, his booming laugh filling the space between conversations about quarterly projections and market penetration strategies that would determine the company's future in an increasingly competitive landscape where innovation meant survival. Richard had joined TechVision 5 years earlier as part of a corporate restructuring that had elevated him from regional sales director to chief technology officer, despite his limited understanding of the actual technology his department produced. Sarah had arrived at TechVision 3 years earlier with nothing but a computer science degree from NYU, student loan debt that kept her awake at night, and a burning ambition to prove that a girl from Queens could compete with the Ivy League graduates who dominated Silicon Alley's glass towers. Her parents, both teachers who had sacrificed everything to give her opportunities they never had, watched with pride as she climbed from junior developer to project lead, though they worried about the toll her relentless work schedule was taking on her health and happiness. Her mother had started leaving containers of homemade sancocho outside Sarah's apartment door when she stopped showing up for Sunday dinners, while her father sent daily text messages with dad jokes that he hoped would coax a smile from his increasingly exhausted daughter. The first months at TechVision had been brutal, with Sarah working to prove herself in an environment where her contributions were often questioned or dismissed by colleagues who seemed more interested in networking than coding. She had learned to document everything meticulously, keeping detailed records of her innovations and breakthroughs in case anyone tried to claim credit for her work. The habit had started as paranoia but evolved into professional wisdom as she witnessed other talented developers see their ideas absorbed into projects led by more senior colleagues who understood corporate politics better than programming languages. The software platform, codenamed Phoenix, represented 18 months of her life distilled into elegant algorithms that could revolutionize how small businesses managed their operations. She had spent countless nights debugging code while her college friends enjoyed happy hours and weekend getaways, her dedication fueled by the belief that hard work and talent would ultimately be recognized and rewarded in a meritocracy that valued results over connections. The platform's name had come to her during a particularly difficult debugging session at 3 a.m, when she realized that her code was rising from the ashes of failed attempts by previous developers who had abandoned the project as impossible. The breakthrough had come during a winter storm that had paralyzed the city, trapping Sarah in her apartment with nothing but her laptop and a deadline that seemed impossible to meet. As snow accumulated against her windows and the heating system struggled against the February cold, She had experienced a moment of clarity that allowed her to see the solution to a problem that had stumped her for months. The elegant simplicity of the final algorithm belied the complexity of the challenge, creating a user interface so intuitive that beta testers had consistently praised its accessibility and functionality. Richard approached the microphone as conversations gradually died down, leaving only the gentle hum of air conditioning and the distant sounds of New York traffic 42 floors below. His presence commanded the room with the confidence of someone who had never questioned his right to stand at the center of attention. His every gesture practiced and polished from decades of corporate presentations to investors who valued charisma as much as profit margins. Sarah noticed the way he positioned himself directly in front of the screen, displaying her wireframes and technical specifications, unconsciously claiming ownership through physical proximity to her intellectual property. The invited guests represented a who's who of the technology investment world, including partners from Kleiner Perkins, Andreessen Horowitz, and Sequoia Capital, who had flown in specifically to evaluate Phoenix's commercial potential. Tech journalists from major publications had positioned themselves strategically throughout the room, their recording devices and notebooks ready to capture every detail of what Richard had promised would be the most significant product launch in TechVision's corporate history. Sarah recognized several faces from industry conferences where she had presented technical papers, though none of them seemed to remember her contributions when Richard dominated the conversation. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the future of business technology," Richard began, his voice carrying across the room with theatrical flair that had made him legendary in boardrooms from Wall Street to Silicon Valley. "Tonight, we launch Phoenix, a revolutionary platform that will transform how America does business, created through the tireless efforts of our incredible development team, led by my capable assistant, Sarah Mitchell." The words seemed to hang in the air like toxic smoke, contaminating everything that followed with its casual dismissal of 3 years of Sarah's professional growth and technical achievement. The word hit Sarah like ice water, freezing her smile mid-formation as murmurs rippled through the crowd of investors, journalists, and industry leaders who would shape the narrative surrounding Phoenix's market debut. Assistant, not lead developer, not architect, not the woman who had sacrificed her social life and mental health to build something extraordinary from nothing more than caffeine-fueled inspiration and stubborn determination to succeed. The term reduced her to a supporting role in her own professional story, transforming her from protagonist to footnote in a single, calculated phrase that revealed Richard's true understanding of her contributions to the project. Her colleague Mike, standing beside her with a champagne flute halfway to his lips, winced visibly at Richard's introduction, while other team members exchanged uncomfortable glances that spoke volumes about the toxic culture of minimizing contributions from anyone who didn't fit the traditional mold of tech leadership. The journalists scribbled notes furiously, already crafting headlines that would reduce 3 years of her life to a footnote in Richard's inevitable rise to industry stardom. Sarah could almost see the articles taking shape in their minds, focusing on Richard's vision and leadership while relegating her technical expertise to the background noise of corporate teamwork. Sarah's phone buzzed insistently against her hip as Richard continued his presentation, taking credit for innovations he barely understood while gesturing toward slides that displayed her code, her user interface designs, and her revolutionary approach to data integration that had impressed even the most skeptical venture capitalists who rarely bet on unproven technologies from unknown developers. Each slide represented weeks of her life, from the initial architecture diagrams she had sketched on napkins during lunch breaks to the final performance benchmarks that proved Phoenix could handle enterprise-level data loads without compromising speed or security. The irony wasn't lost on her that Richard was using her own PowerPoint template, complete with the subtle color scheme and font choices she had selected to reflect Phoenix's user-friendly philosophy. She watched him click through screens that contained her code comments, her variable naming conventions, and her documentation style that had earned praise from senior developers who rarely acknowledged junior colleagues' contributions. The technical specifications he quoted from memory were statistics she had calculated and verified through months of testing on her personal laptop when company resources were allocated to other projects deemed more strategic by the executive team. The first call came from Jennifer Walsh at TechCrunch, her voice urgent with the hunger of a journalist who sensed a story that could define careers and reshape public perception of an industry built on the myth of meritocracy. "Sarah, I need to ask you about the Phoenix platform. Our sources indicate you were the primary architect, but Richard Blackstone just introduced you as his assistant. Can you comment on your actual role in the development process? Jennifer's reputation for thorough investigative reporting had made her a feared figure in Silicon Valley boardrooms, where executives knew that her articles could make or break careers overnight. Sarah stepped into the hallway, her heels clicking against polished marble as she walked past oil paintings of long-dead industrialists who had built their empires through similar combinations of brilliance and ruthless ambition. The rain had intensified, creating abstract patterns on the windows that reminded her of the code structures she visualized when solving complex programming challenges that had stumped senior developers with decades more experience. The hallway's acoustic properties muffled the sounds from the ballroom, creating a cocoon of relative silence where she could think clearly for the first time since Richard had spoken those damaging words. The weight of the moment settled on her shoulders as she realized that her response to Jennifer's question would likely determine the trajectory of her entire career. She could downplay her contributions to maintain corporate harmony, potentially sacrificing her professional reputation for the sake of workplace politics. Or she could tell the truth and risk being labeled as difficult, ambitious, or ungrateful by an industry that often punished women for advocating for themselves with the same assertiveness that was celebrated in male colleagues. "I appreciate your call, Jennifer," Sarah said carefully, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system like electricity through circuit boards. "Phoenix represents 3 years of intensive development work, and I'm proud of what our team accomplished. The technical specifications and innovation timelines speak for themselves, and I'm confident that anyone who examines the development history will understand the scope of contributions from all team members involved." Her diplomatic response masked the fury burning in her chest, but she had learned through painful experience that emotional reactions were often used to dismiss women's legitimate grievances in professional settings. The second call came from Bloomberg, then Forbes, then the Wall Street Journal, each reporter having done their homework about patent filings, code repositories, and internal emails that painted a very different picture than Richard's carefully crafted narrative. Sarah found herself at the center of a media storm she had never anticipated, her phone lighting up with calls from journalists who had spent years covering the tech industry's persistent problems with recognizing contributions from underrepresented groups. Marcus Rodriguez from Bloomberg had spent the previous week analyzing TechVision's GitHub repositories, discovering commit histories that revealed the true authorship of Phoenix's most innovative features. His questions were precise and technical, demonstrating a level of preparation that surprised Sarah and made her realize that serious journalists had been investigating the company's claims long before the launch party. The commit logs show over 2,000 contributions from your account between January 2022 and September 2024, with particular concentration during the periods when major breakthroughs were achieved. Can you walk me through the timeline of Phoenix's development from your perspective? The Forbes reporter, Amanda Chun, had obtained internal emails through sources within TechVision who had grown tired of watching Richard take credit for innovations he hadn't contributed to. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had spent decades covering corporate malfeasance and workplace discrimination in Silicon Valley's most prestigious companies. "We have documentation showing that you filed 3 provisional patents related to Phoenix's core algorithms, all predating Richard Blackstone's involvement in the project. How do you respond to his claims of having conceived and directed the platform's development?" Each conversation revealed another layer of the systematic erasure that had been occurring within TechVision's corporate structure. Sarah learned that other female developers had experienced similar treatment, their contributions minimized or attributed to male colleagues who understood how to navigate corporate politics more effectively than coding challenges. The pattern emerged clearly through the journalists' questions, painting a picture of an organization that consistently undervalued technical expertise while rewarding networking skills and political maneuvering. The Wall Street Journal's technology correspondent had interviewed former TechVision employees who confirmed Sarah's central role in Phoenix's development while expressing frustration with the company's culture of credit appropriation. These sources, speaking on condition of anonymity, described a workplace where innovative ideas were routinely absorbed by managers who had learned to position themselves strategically around promising projects. The journalist's questions forced Sarah to confront the reality that her experience wasn't unique but part of a broader pattern of exploitation that affected talented developers throughout the industry. Back in the ballroom, Richard continued his presentation, oblivious to the brewing scandal that would dominate tech news cycles for weeks to come. He spoke about vision and leadership while Sarah's code ran smoothly on the demonstration screens, each function executing flawlessly because she had tested every line thousands of times during those long nights when exhaustion blurred the boundary between determination and obsession. The irony of watching him present her work as his own achievement created a surreal disconnect between public narrative and private reality that would soon collapse under journalistic scrutiny. The demonstration itself was a masterpiece of Sarah's technical artistry, showcasing features that had required months of development and refinement to achieve the seamless functionality that impressed investors and industry veterans alike. The user interface responded instantly to Richard's commands, its elegant design masking the complexity of algorithms that processed thousands of data points in real time while maintaining security protocols that had earned certification from federal agencies responsible for protecting sensitive business information. Sarah's parents called during a brief lull in media inquiries, their voices filled with confusion and concern as they tried to understand why their daughter was being described as an assistant when they had heard her explain the technical complexities of her work during Sunday dinners at their modest home in Astoria. Her mother's voice carried 3 decades of experience navigating workplace discrimination as one of the few Latina teachers in her school district, while her father offered quiet words of support that reminded Sarah why she had started this journey in the first place. "Mija," her mother said softly, "you know who you are and what you've accomplished. Don't let anyone diminish that, no matter how powerful they think they are. Your grandmother cleaned offices so I could become a teacher, and I taught students so you could build the future. That legacy doesn't disappear because some man in an expensive suit wants to take credit for your work." The conversation transported Sarah back to childhood evenings when her mother had helped with homework while grading papers, demonstrating through actions rather than words that education and hard work could overcome systemic barriers. Her father's approach was characteristically practical, offering to help her document everything that might be relevant to proving her contributions to Phoenix's development. As a high school mathematics teacher, he understood the importance of showing work and maintaining clear records that could withstand scrutiny from skeptical audiences. "Keep copies of everything, Sarah. Emails, code comments, design documents, meeting notes. The truth has a way of emerging when there's solid evidence to support it. Don't let anyone convince you that your work speaks quietly when it should be shouting from the rooftops." The family conversation grounded Sarah in values that had shaped her work ethic and professional integrity since childhood. Her parents had immigrated from Puerto Rico with nothing but determination and a commitment to education that had carried them through decades of sacrifice and struggle. Their daughter's success represented the fulfillment of dreams they had nurtured through lean years when college seemed financially impossible and professional careers in technology were rarely accessible to families like theirs. The calls kept coming throughout the evening, each conversation revealing another layer of the story that would ultimately reshape how the industry viewed both TechVision Industries and the broader question of recognition and credit in collaborative environments. Sarah answered each question with measured precision, providing technical details that demonstrated intimate knowledge of every aspect of Phoenix's development, while maintaining professionalism despite the growing anger that threatened to overwhelm her composure. A reporter from Wired magazine had discovered that Sarah's innovative approach to data compression had been cited in academic papers published by MIT and Stanford researchers who had recognized her contributions to the field of distributed computing. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that university professors had given her credit for breakthroughs that her own boss had attributed to his leadership and vision. These citations provided independent validation of her technical expertise from sources that Richard couldn't influence or discredit through corporate politics. TechRadar's senior correspondent had interviewed beta testers who consistently praised Phoenix's user-friendly design and intuitive interface, characteristics that reflected Sarah's commitment to understanding end-user needs rather than impressing technical reviewers. Small business owners from across the country had voluntarily provided testimonials about how the platform had streamlined their operations, reduced costs, and improved efficiency in ways that previous software solutions had failed to achieve. Their unanimous praise for Phoenix's accessibility and functionality contradicted Richard's claims about the technical challenges that only his experience could have overcome. The technology blog VentureBeat had obtained internal performance reviews that documented Sarah's exceptional contributions to previous projects, her innovative problem-solving abilities, and her reputation among colleagues as the most technically proficient developer in TechVision's history. These reviews, written before Phoenix's development began, established a clear pattern of excellence that supported her claims about leading the platform's creation. The documentation revealed that Richard had consistently rated her performance as outstanding while simultaneously minimizing her role in public presentations and investor meetings. Meanwhile, social media had erupted with support from developers around the world who shared their own experiences with bosses who had taken credit for their innovations. The hashtag PhoenixGate became a rallying cry for workplace transparency, generating thousands of posts from programmers, engineers, and technical professionals who had watched their contributions disappear into corporate narratives that elevated managers at the expense of individual contributors. The global response demonstrated that Sarah's experience reflected a systemic problem rather than an isolated incident. By 10 o'clock, PhoenixGate was trending on Twitter as developers from around the world shared their own experiences with bosses who had minimized their contributions or taken credit for their innovations. The hashtag became a rallying cry for transparency in an industry that prided itself on disruption while perpetuating age-old patterns of exploitation that had defined corporate America for generations. Comments poured in from programmers in Silicon Valley, financial technologists in London, game developers in Tokyo, and startup founders in Tel Aviv, creating a global conversation about recognition and accountability in technology workplaces. The Twitter thread initiated by @DevAdvocate had garnered over 50,000 retweets within hours, with responses ranging from personal anecdotes about credit theft to technical analyses of Phoenix's innovative features that clearly demonstrated Sarah's authorship. Senior developers from major tech companies began sharing their own stories of watching talented colleagues get overlooked while politically savvy managers received promotions and recognition for work they hadn't performed. The collective response created a digital paper trail that would be impossible for Richard or TechVision's leadership to ignore or dismiss. GitHub users had begun analyzing TechVision's public repositories, creating detailed breakdowns of commit histories that revealed the true authors of Phoenix's most significant innovations. These technical deep dives, shared widely across programming forums and social media platforms, provided irrefutable evidence of Sarah's central role in the platform's development. The crowdsourced investigation demonstrated the tech community's ability to fact-check corporate claims using the same tools that companies use to track their developers' contributions. Richard's assistant, ironically enough, began fielding calls from increasingly agitated investors who had based their funding decisions on Richard's claims of personal involvement in Phoenix's development. The carefully constructed narrative began crumbling as journalists uncovered documentation that revealed Sarah's central role in everything from initial concept development to final quality assurance testing that had made the platform's successful launch possible. Venture capital firms that had committed millions based on Richard's presentation found themselves questioning the due diligence process that had failed to identify the actual source of TechVision's competitive advantage. Sarah stood in the empty hallway, watching the rain create rivulets on the windows as she considered her options with the clear analytical thinking that had made her such an exceptional developer. She could remain silent and preserve her relationship with Richard, potentially sacrificing her career advancement for the sake of corporate harmony. Or she could embrace the attention and use it as a platform to advocate for recognition of contributions that had been systematically overlooked throughout her career. The decision crystallized as she thought about the countless hours she had spent perfecting Phoenix's algorithms, the breakthrough moments that had come at 3 a.m. when most of the world was sleeping, and the satisfaction of watching her code solve real problems for real people. This wasn't about ego or recognition for its own sake, but about establishing a precedent that would protect other developers from experiencing the same erasure that had defined too many careers in the technology industry. Her reflection was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Patricia Williams, her former computer science professor who had somehow learned about the evening's events and had come to offer support. Professor Williams had spent decades watching brilliant students navigate corporate environments that often failed to recognize talent that didn't conform to traditional expectations. Her presence in the hallway represented a bridge between Sarah's academic foundation and her professional reality, reminding her that intellectual integrity was worth defending regardless of political consequences. "Sarah," Professor Williams said with the quiet authority that had commanded respect in lecture halls for 30 years. "I've been following your work since graduation, and I want you to know that your contributions to distributed computing have been recognized by the academic community long before tonight's controversy. The algorithms you developed for Phoenix have applications far beyond business software, and that innovation can't be erased by corporate politics or public relations campaigns. The conversation with her mentor provided perspective that helped Sarah understand the broader implications of her situation. Professor Williams had seen generations of talented women enter the technology industry with exceptional skills and innovative ideas, only to watch many of them struggle against systemic barriers that minimize their contributions while amplifying the voices of less qualified male colleagues. The pattern had persisted for decades despite legal protections and corporate diversity initiatives that often prioritized appearance over substance. Her phone buzzed with a text from her college roommate, now a successful patent attorney who had watched Sarah's career with admiration and growing concern about the toxic dynamics that seemed to define her workplace. Saw the news. Time to make a choice. You can't unsay what's been said, but you can control what happens next. Call me when you're ready to discuss your options legally and professionally. The message carried weight beyond friendship, representing access to legal expertise that could protect Sarah's interests if the situation escalated beyond public relations into actual litigation. The legal implications had become increasingly relevant as journalists uncovered evidence of potentially fraudulent claims in TechVision's investor presentations. Securities lawyers were already analyzing whether Richard's misrepresentation of Phoenix's development team constituted material misstatement that could affect the company's valuation and investor relations. The possibility of federal investigation added gravity to a situation that had begun as workplace drama but was evolving into a case study in corporate governance and fiduciary responsibility. The elevator doors opened, revealing Richard and several investors engaged in animated conversation about damage control and narrative management strategies that would protect the company's reputation while minimizing the impact of what they clearly viewed as an unfortunate public relations crisis, rather than a fundamental question about fairness and recognition in collaborative environments. Their body language and urgent whispers suggested that they understood the serious financial implications of the unfolding scandal. Richard's demeanor had changed dramatically from the confident presenter who had commanded the ballroom's attention just hours earlier. His earlier theatrical confidence had been replaced by nervous energy that manifested in fidgeting hands and darting glances that suggested he was calculating the potential damage to his career and reputation. The investors flanking him wore expressions of barely contained frustration, their substantial financial commitments now threatened by revelations that undermined the fundamental assumptions underlying their investment decisions. "Sarah," Richard said, his voice carrying forced warmth that fooled no one who understood the stakes involved in the unfolding situation. "We need to talk about managing this situation appropriately. The company's reputation and your future career prospects depend on handling this professionally and discreetly, without unnecessary drama that could harm everyone involved." His attempt at paternal authority rang hollow given the circumstances, revealing desperation rather than leadership in his approach to crisis management. Sarah looked at him for a long moment, seeing clearly for the first time the calculating expression behind his practiced smile and the fear in his eyes as he realized that his carefully constructed image was crumbling under scrutiny from journalists who specialized in exposing the gap between public personas and private realities. She thought about her parents' sacrifices, her grandmother's struggles, and the generations of brilliant women whose contributions had been erased from history by men who confused presence with contribution. "Richard," she said quietly, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had finally decided to stop apologizing for taking up space in rooms where she belonged. "I think it's time for the truth to speak for itself. Phoenix exists because of the work I did, the team I led, and the vision I brought to life through countless hours of coding, testing, and refinement. That's not opinion or interpretation. It's documented fact that any competent journalist can verify through patent filings, code repositories, and development timelines." The investors shifted uncomfortably as they realized they were witnessing a confrontation that would likely determine the future of their investment and the public perception of a company they had bet millions on based on Richard's carefully crafted presentation of leadership and innovation. The rain continued drumming against the windows, creating a soundtrack for a moment that would define careers and reshape an industry's understanding of recognition and accountability. Over the following weeks, Sarah's story became a catalyst for broader conversations about workplace dynamics, recognition, and the subtle ways that contributions from underrepresented groups were systematically minimized or erased from corporate narratives. She received job offers from companies that valued transparency and technical excellence over political maneuvering, while Richard found himself facing increased scrutiny from boards and investors who questioned his leadership style and commitment to accurate representation of team contributions. Sarah ultimately left TechVision to join a startup founded by former colleagues who shared her commitment to building technology that made a difference while fostering workplace cultures based on meritocracy rather than politics. Phoenix continued to succeed in the marketplace, its technical excellence speaking louder than any corporate presentation could, while Sarah's reputation as a brilliant developer and ethical leader opened doors that had previously seemed impossible to access. The launch party had ended with champagne and handshakes, but it began a conversation that continued long after the last guest departed, and the caterers cleared away the remnants of an evening that would be remembered not for its celebration of technological achievement, but for its exposure of systemic problems that had persisted in corporate America for far too long. Sarah's story became a reminder that talent and hard work create lasting value, while empty titles and corporate politics create only temporary illusions that crumble under the weight of truth. She had learned that sometimes the most important moments in our careers happen not when we're climbing ladders, but when we're deciding whether to continue climbing ladders that lead nowhere or to build our own paths toward destinations worth reaching. The rain eventually stopped, the lights in the Chrysler Building dimmed, and New York settled into another night of dreams and schemes that would shape tomorrow's headlines. But somewhere in Queens, a teacher's daughter who had refused to be diminished continued writing code that would change the world, one elegant algorithm at a time, proving that recognition delayed is not recognition denied when talent refuses to be silenced. Sarah's apartment had become a shrine to her determination, with white boards covered in pseudocode and sticky notes marking important breakthrough moments that had led to Phoenix's creation. The walls bore witness to late-night eureka moments and early-morning debugging sessions that had transformed abstract concepts into functional reality. Her kitchen table had served as both dining surface and development workstation, its scarred wood surface marked by coffee rings and pen marks that told the story of a young woman's relentless pursuit of excellence in an industry that often overlooked contributions from people who didn't fit the traditional Silicon Valley stereotype. The months following the launch party had transformed Sarah from anonymous developer to reluctant industry spokesperson for workplace equity and recognition. Speaking engagements at major conferences allowed her to share not just her technical expertise, but her insights about building inclusive development teams that valued contributions based on merit rather than politics. Her story had inspired other developers to document their work more carefully and advocate for appropriate recognition, creating a ripple effect that was slowly changing industry culture one conversation at a time. Phoenix itself had exceeded all market projections, with small businesses across the country adopting the platform at rates that surprised even the most optimistic investors. Customer testimonials consistently praised the software's intuitive design and robust functionality, characteristics that reflected Sarah's deep understanding of end-user needs and her commitment to creating technology that solved real problems rather than impressing venture capitalists. The platform's success had validated her original vision while proving that technical excellence would ultimately triumph over corporate politics and marketing hype. Sarah's new position at the startup had allowed her to build the kind of development culture she had always envisioned, where contributions were recognized transparently and team members were encouraged to take ownership of their innovations. The company's commitment to equity and inclusion wasn't just a public relations strategy, but a fundamental business principle that had attracted top talent from companies tired of toxic workplace dynamics. Her team had already begun developing their next platform, with Sarah serving as both technical lead and cultural architect for an organization that valued substance over style. The launch party had become a cautionary tale told in business schools and professional development seminars, illustrating the dangers of toxic leadership and the importance of building corporate cultures based on honesty and respect. Richard's career had stagnated as his reputation for taking credit became widely known throughout the industry, while Sarah's commitment to transparency and collaboration had made her one of the most sought-after technical leaders in the competitive New York startup ecosystem. The contrast between their trajectories had become a powerful reminder that authentic leadership creates lasting value, while superficial charisma generates only temporary advantages.